Hello and welcome to Newsbreak Chats. Ako po si Chai Hofelenia, ang editor ng Newsbreak. Ito ang investigative at in-depth section ng Rappler. Katapusan na naman ng buwan, kaya't napapanahon na muli ang Newsbreak Chats. Kung naalala nyo, last March, nag-home edition din ang Newsbreak Chats at umasa pa nga tayo na yung next round, siguro sana tapos na yung lockdown. But here we are, nandito pa rin sa mga bahay-bahay natin at under lockdown pa rin. At alam natin na ang extension ay hanggang May 15. At that's for Metro Manila, Luzon at iba pang areas na marami pang positive cases of COVID-19. If you recall, Metro Manila was placed under what was called, yung sabi nga ni Gigi Go sa kanyang newsletter, kung binabasa nyo yon, sabi niya, yun ay parang euphemism, yung tinatawag na enhanced community quarantine, euphemism really for lockdown. Nung March 15 ito, so by May 15, magdadalawang buwan na tayo. We thought it appropriate to assess what the Duterte administration has done so far, whether these are enough, and what else needs to be done. With me today are senior editors of Rappler. Kasama natin si Glenda Gloria, ang aming managing editor. Hi, Glenda.
Hello, hi Chai, hi everyone.
Nandito rin si Gigi, si Miriam Grace Go, ang aming news editor. Hi, G.
Hello.
And of course, ang aming editor at large, hindi siya large, si Marites Vitug.
Medium size
Hello.
lang. Hello,
okay,
everyone.
Nagkataon lang na lahat kami babae. Ganun talaga sa Rappler, it's really dominated by women. It's an organization dominated by women. Anyway, welcome to Newsbreak Chats, ladies.
Hello.
Sige,
Glad
simulan
to be
na.
back.
Yes. Siguro naman sa susunod, no? Tapos na tong lockdown, hopefully. Anyway, balikan lang natin kasi mahigit isang buwan na, mag-iisang buwan na yung lockdown. I'd like to start by asking you, was there anything that surprised you about this administration's handling of the pandemic? Meron bang positive things that you saw and meron bang pleasant surprises din? Marites, you want to start?
Ako, yung pleasant surprise ko is not because of this entire government's approach. Na-surprise ako na an office which has been marginalized, Office of the Vice President, was able to organize transport. I remember distinctly yung first day ng lockdown because people were at a loss how to get to their jobs. My kasambahay walked more than an hour just to come here, and people were asking, how do we get to work? And I was so surprised that this little office, with, as Gigi said, with the smallest budget in government, was able to send out buses, transport for all frontliners. So that really surprised me. How can this small office do that with a minimal budget, but with strong support from, I think, private sector?
Mm-mm. So that network, no? Came
Nagulat
into
ako
play.
doon. Yes.
Glenda?
Well, I think my pleasant surprise is the fact that Panelo is out. I think
Okay.
pleasant in a way that I think he was really not fit to speak for the president during this crisis. He was so much of a clown. Not to say that Harry Roque does not, humor us sometimes, but I think they really need more cohesion in terms of messaging, and si Panelo would be really like just trying to spin out of control every issue in this crisis.
So you saw that as a positive thing.
Kasi along with it came probably a more predictable press briefing later on, and even for once, diba, si Presidente, at least the public address was aired in the morning. So you could imagine behind the scenes that some sort of fixing is being done, even as we speak.
Okay, sige, we'll talk a little more extensively about that later. Pero siguro ngayon, parang overview lang muna of the good things that you've been seeing so far. G?
Ako, since I've been monitoring local governments, I've said it in your past interview, some local governments were ahead of the national government in trying to set up a response system. So even weeks before a lockdown was declared. In fact, even this was after the first few cases were detected in the Philippines. There were some local governments who already made do with what they had, started setting up quarantine areas, started doing restricting movements and monitoring Chinese tourists, for example, way ahead of any guidelines from the national government.
So parang what you saw was irrespective of the national government, kung mahusay yung leadership at the local level, then
yes,
makikita talaga yon. Okay. When the lockdown or ECQ was first declared, nung dineclare siya nung March, what was the first thing that worried you, that came to your mind?
Ako, yung very abrupt yung implementation. Like, it was announced today, tapos in 48 hours, this would be in effect. I knew that their purpose somehow was to prevent people from Metro Manila to go home to the provinces and might spread the virus. But it also caused a lot of problems for people who needed to prepare for the lockdown. Pangalawa is the guidelines that were issued by the National Task Force were a bit vague and open to interpretation, and we could see in the following days na doon tayo nagkaroon ng problema because each local government unit had a different interpretation, different set of rules during the quarantine, making it harder for people who are already constrained with their movements and activities.
Ano yung, just to follow up to that, no? Kung ganon, kung parang medyo biglaan, do you see there parang unpreparedness on the part of the government? Kasi as early as December, January, parang meron ng early warnings, di ba, na baka itong nangyayari sa China might be a serious pandemic. And then, yeah, G.
Yun yung lumalabas kasi you could follow the statements of the president, the position of the health secretary about certain measures na hindi pa dapat mag-travel ban from China, hindi ba dapat mag-emergency arrangements. You could tell they were not taking this seriously. Tapos yung biglang lockdown in 48 hours, it seems that's the only time they realized there's going to be an outbreak or there's already an outbreak. So because there were no response system in place, biglang, sige, i-lockdown na lang natin lahat ng mga tao. Ganun. And then, ang nangyari, you could see is, they were coming up with new guidelines or new interpretation as they encountered problems or as people complained.
Okay. Sige. Glenn?
I think my biggest concern then was leadership. Mm-hmm. Parang it was really like, this is an administration kasi that's not so used to a whole government approach to it, to certain problems. The president is not used to consensus building. He makes decisions, he shoots from the hip, etc. So yun yung biggest concern, and obviously it unraveled later on, no? Because there's no, parang patience is not really an asset or of the president, right? And this crisis requires a lot of detail, understanding, knowledge even, and really listening to various points of view. So yun ang biggest concern ko, na parang he'll treat it like a drug war. Mm-hmm. And I guess ultimately parang that's how he attacked it initially.
Oo, di ba? That's parang police approach, di ba,
Yes,
Marites?
I think,
Yeah.
I think he copied Wuhan. He copied Wuhan, a complete total lockdown without the science to back it up and without even telling us. Eh, syempre, nakakagulat yun, di ba? Biglang wala, what is happening? Tapos, no expert has explained it to us so far. You know, in the DOH latest tracker, in the latest statement nila, ang sabi nila, itong ECQ daw ng Luzon, hindi pa conclusive ang results. Ang sabi lang, their words were, it seems that the ECQ has just steadied the numbers. So there is so much emphasis on lockdown, but where are the other responses? Di ba nakaka-frustrate? Testing. Of course, today, we reported that DOH will not meet the 8,000 tests per day na target. So yun yung excessive reliance on the shock and awe, Wuhan type effect ng ating dear President.
Yun yung comfort zone niya kasi, di ba? As mayor, tapos yun na nga, coming off from the drug war, and nagmamadali, parang cramming it in a way. So parang ito yung immediate, ito yung familiar. So same solution, different problem.
Actually,
Tsaka yung parang,
we're cooperating naman with the lockdown but we want to see government do its part, more than, do its part better. Okay lang, we're cooperating. So, I haven't had a haircut in 2 months.
Hindi, pero
Okay.
try yung always giving the president quote unquote an excuse na comfort zone niya kasi yung peace and order, he thinks like a mayor, pero parang I think it should be incumbent upon citizens not to let him get away with it. 4 years na siyang presidente, we cannot always say kasi mayor siya mag-isip. Medyo dapat mag-level up. Pangalawa, we're in our 7th week of lockdown. So, by next week, mas mahaba na yung lockdown natin kaysa sa Italy. Pero doon sa addressing the health aspect of the crisis, hindi pa tayo nagpo-progress masyado. As Mother said, testing is hindi pa widespread. Ganun.
May I
kay
clarify who
Duque?
Mother is?
Ano yun?
Mother is Marites.
Okay.
Anong sense yung kay Duque? Because you've been mentioning nga, dapat may expert sana because, ang expertise talaga ni Duterte is crime and the drug war. And we have a different problem. It's a very complex problem. So, eto, DOH, at kailangan mo ng health secretary. So, nagkaroon din ba ng problema doon kay Duque?
ay oo naman. Because Duque's priority was to please the president. And to say the things that the president wanted to hear. Which is not, parang hindi naman siya, parang there's a lack of, in a way, humility to accept that there was a lot that we did not know in the initial stages of the pandemic and that there was a lot to learn. Wala namang masama sa ganun, di ba? Pero instead, nasanay kasi in the last 3 years na parang there are assumptions na, we're experts, we can do this, we can attack this.
Marites, you wanted to say something?
No, it's just there's this culture in Malacanang already wherein we've seen it from the beginning in 2016 na yung kultura doon, you don't question the president. There is no robust debate. Nobody contradicts him. So ganun siguro yung kultura. Kaya si Duque in late February said that the Philippines is a model country in dealing with the coronavirus. I remember that. So
WHO kasi yung nagsabi nun, di ba? Kaya sinay.
True. Yeah.
Isa pa yan. Tapos March 6 was the first day that we learned of the local transmission. Yet, days after that, Duterte was addressing 1,000 mayors in this air-conditioned hall in a hotel. Violating what DOH said in February that you should avoid mass gatherings. So, anyway, makikita naman natin if we go back, yun nga, they took it for granted. As
Pero
Glenda
diba, ang well, the usual thing is hindi naman din the Duterte cabinet, hindi naman to unique sa kanila, di ba? If you look at Trump, halimbawa, parang ano rin parang takot, even in the previous administrations, takot ang mga cabinet members to stand up to challenge, or to present contrary views to the president. So, it's the same thing that happened here. Yun yung sasabihin ng iba.
Pero ibang klaseng crisis kasi ito, di ba? Parang we've never had something like this and this extent before. So parang if you're, parang konsensya mo as a professional or as an expert in your field, na lalo na kung doktor ka or scientist ka, na kailangan mong magsalita when you know that the approach that the cabinet or the government is taking is medyo mali or nakaliko.
Sige, so we've been magdadalawang buwan na, close to 2 months, no? And yun na nga, we've been seeing a lot of tension. Parang may mga iba't ibang interests that have to be balanced and that have to be weighed. So kasama na dyan ang economy. So merong nagsasabi na, sige na, let's open up kasi hindi kaya ng ekonomiya, maraming nawawalan ng trabaho, madaming nagugutom. Meron ding politics versus science, etc. Dito sa mga contrasting interests or clashing interests na ito, ano yung nakastrike sa inyo the most, na palagay nyo ito yung at the root siguro of this crisis?
I can start.
Yeah, sige, start. No, go ahead, Gigi.
Yung belated consultation with former health secretaries. Parang we were more than a month into the lockdown when they gathered the former DOH secretaries. And then all of a sudden, too, there's a reaching out to scientists. Na what can we do? How do we move forward? Parang di ba dapat ito yung mga eksperto na kinonsulta mo even before declaring a lockdown? Or kung biglaan talaga yung lockdown in the early weeks, sana sila na yung tinawag. Kasi ang nangyayari, every time the lockdown was about to expire, magde-declare sila ng extension, pero hindi pa rin sila nagtatanong doon sa experts kung paano gagawin natin, anong paplanuhin natin during that extension. So, yun lang.
Marites?
It was 1 month after the lockdown that first time we heard anything about testing from the president. 1 month after the lockdown, he said he ordered the purchase of rapid test kits. Never did he mention testing. Di ba ito yung first step? So, yun nga, as you said earlier, very strong on public order and police perspective, but very weak on public health. So I hope that we're all cooperating naman dito sa lockdown. So I hope that we will see a more vigorous testing. We're one of the lowest in ASEAN, in the Southeast Asia, when it comes to testing, actually.
Glenda?
Well, to me, siguro, I remember one of the first few press conferences of the president when he thanked the big business people, SM, San Miguel. Parang the worst hit kasi sa industries are the medium and the small businesses. Lalo na in the last 3 years, you've seen a lot of young entrepreneurs put up their own restaurants. I mean, yun yung talagang kabuhayan. And these are not capital infused companies, and therefore parang there was a lack of appreciation of the extent of the problem in the level of the small and medium businesses.
Pero if you think about it, there are naman experts in the cabinet, like you have Sani Dominguez, you had Pernia before he resigned, na dapat yun sana yung tumututok sa economy, and then Duque and the DOH staff, competent naman sila, RITM. So parang the ingredients naman are there, the people naman are there, pero parang hindi nag-come together at the right time. is this because of leadership nga, as Glenda put it, or meron din bang organizational, systemic, bureaucratic reasons for this?
Parang
Well,
kasing
yeah.
ang sense ko lang is that when crisis like this occurs, parang you play catch up if you've not been competent prior to the crisis. Parang you cannot be overnight an organized team. You cannot be coherent overnight. You cannot be very nuanced overnight. So in a way, parang binabalikan yung, it's payback. Parang ganon, parang we've neglected a lot of governance issues, and therefore, ito na, bumabalik, even decision making, even processes, rules and regulations, ganon. So parang yun lang, ang hirap hirap ka kung sa 3 taon, panay bang ka lang and panay quick fixes ka lang. Hindi mo naintindihan na itong problemang to pangmatagalan, and therefore paano mo siya i-address? Kung nasanay ka sa short term.
And if you remember, we were several weeks into the lockdown before cabinet secretaries were ordered to draw up their strategies, per department strategy, to combat parang to respond to the crisis. And we, at that time, I remember counting, that was 78 days after the first case was detected in the Philippines. And yeah, several weeks into the lockdown. Parang, so ngayon lang ito.
Yeah, and recently, in the recent press briefing or statement of the president, he ordered FDA and Department of Science and Technology to ramp up. Somehow, how come DOH is not there? DOH has not adapted its work habits to the crisis. There are 66, I was just checking because, I had to research, 66 pending applications for laboratories. Only 19 have been licensed. So, paano na yung 32 na nag-aantay stage 4, stage 3? And then I read somewhere that the UP National Institute of Health, they were offering themselves to help DOH in accrediting these laboratories. So why aren't we moving? It is so frustrating. 19 laboratories, 4,000 plus tests a day. Let's look at our neighbor, Thailand, 20,000 tests a day, at least 50 labs.
Ang layo natin.
Yeah, so yun lang, nakaka-frustrate kasi we're all cooperating. We are all good citizens. Of course, there are abuses by the police, as Gigi has written extensively on. But we are all cooperating. So please, let the Department of Health also move fast. They can bank on, they can call on other sectors of society to help them accredit these laboratories. It's really, really frustrating.
Do you have a sense na okay, kailangan talaga natin ng lockdown, because without the lockdown, things would have probably become even more complicated. We can't do it the way Sweden or Taiwan, South Korea have done it. Kailangan ba talaga ng Pilipino ng lockdown?
Sa tingin ko, oo, pero dapat nga merong nakaplanong maayos na paano mo, ang nangyari kasi sa lockdown natin, mayroong biglang walang trabaho, walang sweldo, walang makain. And as basic as paano ako pupunta sa palengke kung walang tricycle. Yung mga ganun, parang anything that would assist people to be able to parang go on with their daily lives kahit na merong physical distancing, merong stricter measures. Wala yun eh. Parang basta ka na lang kinulong, tas bahala ka mag-survive without any help, ganun. Kailangan naman, pero the government should have planned ahead.
You agree, Glenda?
Yeah, I agree that we need the lockdown. We even violate traffic rules. So I mean, I think we're the type of people who really needs to be
Needs a lot.
ordered and a sense of parang iba-box mo yung daily habits. But again, I agree also with Gigi that it's just a matter of maybe preparing for it. So kung 48 hours lang yung window mo to prepare for a lockdown, that has not happened in our entire history. 'Di ba? May lockdown sa Taal during the eruption, pero hindi ganito. So wala pang ganito eh. So everything was new to us, and therefore sana man lang pinaghandaan din kasi bago eh.
Marites?
Yes, nagulat lang ako nung lockdown natin. Kasi I was reading up on Italy during their lockdown. The public transport continued but in reduced schedules. And there were people, frontliners. In fact, even a few journalists were allowed to commute. So nagulat ako na Italy with this very dire situation, may public transport but very limited. So tayo completely wala. Well, so yun nga, as Gigi said, maybe they have to rethink this. Eventually, maybe after May 15, they're thinking of how to ease down.
Diba si Dr. Mahar Mangahas of SWS, he was discussing this recent webinar ng Rappler Plus community. Nasabi niya, if we needed to enforce discipline, sana ang disiplina was that you are allowed to go to work, you are allowed to travel, pero may physical distancing, may limitation sa activities, pero yung hindi totally aalisin sa iyo yung karapatan mong magtrabaho at kumita and to move around. Yun.
Pero paano yon kung ang syudad mo, Maynila, napaka-congested, di ba? Parang how will you control transport? How will you control palengke? Ganun kasimple. Parang paano mo ipopolice ang mga tao na i-enforce mo pa rin ang physical distancing?
Yung palengke, isang interesting point yan. For example, one, in some cities, in our city for example, first day of the lockdown, meron na kaming what we call kariton palengke. People who get to go to the public market, tapos nasa kariton nila, iikot lang sila sa barangay. So the residents don't have to go to the palengke. Pero sa ibang cities, I found out, sinisita yung mga ganong klase ng vendors. Parang may mga ganon. Tapos, or yung iba namang cities, ang ginagawa nila is, they limited the operating hours of the public market. So, ang nangyayari is, people would go there in droves, lalong magkakaroon ng congestion. While, compared to other LGUs, ang ginawa naman nila is, same operating hours of the public market, but they color-coded the barangays. So on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, only these barangays can go to the market. So hindi nagko-congest. And then yung mga palengke, makikita mo yung iba, may markers na sila na nilagay na kung pupunta ka sa palengke, ito yung pila mo para hindi kayo magkakadikit.
Meron again, Malacanang could have convened a meeting with all the LGUs if they were really dead set as early as January. Tawagin lahat ng mayors ng NCR. Ito yon, this is how we plot it. Diba? So, hindi yung a day before or a few days before.
Makikita mo dito na parang nagkanya-kanya nga ng guidelines. So, kung may common sense yung local officials mo, maayos yung patakaran sa inyo. And kasama to sa naging parang sa tension points then that we were asking about China. As we said, even before there was a lockdown, some local governments were doing okay responding to the potential outbreak. Tapos nung nagkaroon ng lockdown, Malacanang was busier trying to control the LGUs than letting them do what they deemed best sa kanilang communities. And there were threats about kakasuhan kayo if you go ahead and interpret the rules this way. And then a month into the lockdown, nag-concede din naman yung National Task Force na LGUs would be on the front lines of responding to the crisis. So parang nagtakutan pa kayo, inabala nyo pa yung mga local government officials na nagtatrabaho ng maayos. Tapos aaminin niya din pala na, well, you really cannot control how they will implement this kasi sila yung nasa baba.
I'm just curious kasi we've seen various administrations, nakita natin iba't ibang krisis ang dinaanan ng mga administrasyong ito. If we were to propose halimbawa or sana ito yung ideal, ano sana yung gusto nyong nakita in a quick response to a crisis like this na no government, no country is ever prepared for? Ano yung quick, siguro, first 3 things that you would do or you would ask or expect the president to do?
Well, first would be, as early as January, convene the LGUs and organize them according to regions. This is a Fidel Ramos style of management, di ba? That was why madali siya noon for every crisis, so ganon. And then, you respect precisely their autonomy, but on the other hand, there would be general guidelines. That would be the first. And second, so that's your governance aspect. Second would be bring together experts, di ba? We have a lot. The former health secretaries, it's not so much consensus building, but just getting their points of view on how to move forward. And third would be precisely to bring together business and labor. Kasi yun yung parang day-to-day lang nag-adjust eh. Parang ito, walang trabaho pala, ganon. But if may meeting of the minds naman, then false naman yung dichotomy na business and labor interests are not, di ba? They're together ultimately. So I would say those would be the 3 things.
Okay,
and one more.
Experts,
and then maybe not rely too much on the military to do everything. Like, I think yun, i-deploy kang military kasi sila lang ang mahusay. The military is mahusay kung mahusay ang nagko-command sa kanila. Kasi the military will not take the lead. I mean, to be fair to them, they will implement orders. So, kung mali ang order, mali din ang implementation nila.
Patay. Marites?
Yun nga, yung sinabi ni Glenda, yung National Task Force Against COVID-19 is led by the Defense Secretary and the Interior Secretary. Both are retired generals, and the chief implementer is a retired General Galvez. So 3 generals. They have different sets of consultants from the DOH consultants. So sana, ang gusto ko sana, early on, meron na tayong, sorry to compare, sana meron na tayong Dr. Fauci. Meron na tayong expert na kasama ni whoever, General Galvez, but speaks with an expert. So lagi tayong naghahanap, ano ba ang science dito? I remember this Carlo Nograles said, science is in charge here. Okay, I was so happy to hear that. But no expert talked to us. Really, except Duque with his maala-ala mo kaya tone and pace, so he's not talking to us anymore. But really, up to today, has anyone talked to us? This is really...
Harry Roque has spoken with us.
This is really a great absence, the absence of science in all of this, because no expert has talked to us about it. So, yun, nakaka-frustrate lang. Kahit na sana may kasama si Harry sa pag-brief niya na expert, maybe, I don't know, they might do this.
G, you mentioned yung, at nabanggit din naman ni Glenda, yung local government, no? Parang, have you seen elements nga na, kung baga, maganda tong ginagawa nitong LGU na to, this other LGU is doing this good thing, na pag pinagsama-sama mo yung iba't ibang elements na yon, you could have a very successful implementation of a quarantine.
Alam mo ang isa, on their own, there are a few LGUs na magkakakilala yung mayors, and what they do is, if one is working well in Pasig, gagayahin ng Valenzuela, for example.
Viber na sila, di ba?
Oo. Tapos, you can also see na sa Calabar zone, because Cavite was the first province to initiate yung mass testing, and there's a partner laboratory, yung local hospital, John Vic was saying na sasagutin namin whatever the other Calabarzon provinces need in terms of testing for now habang sila nagsiset up pa. In a crisis like this, I realized andito yung potential sana ng inter-LGU planning na hindi natin nagagawa. Glenda was citing the regional approach ng Ramos government. Actually, sa Ramos government, nagsimula yung you have regional development councils, regional peace and order councils. Ito yung totally nawala at all sa radar when we entered this crisis. Ito dapat, kasi nga, it's a virus. Hindi mo to mako-contain sa checkpoint mo, hindi mo to mako-contain sa isang barangay or LGU. So, dapat talaga nagpaplano together at nagko-coordinate ng measures yung magkakatabi na provinces.
And irony is your president is a former mayor, hindi ba?
Correct.
I think ang problema din sa kinasanayan ni Duterte is Davao City kasi is within a province but it has always been an independent city. Ang nakakalungkot we've observed is that in the provinces, when you have an independent city na not administratively under a province, merong a certain kind of pride na you don't say we're part of this province, we're this city. So you can see na halimbawa, yung Cagayan de Oro now, nakikipag-away sa provincial government ng Misamis Oriental dahil parang sa mga lockdown or sa borders nila or sa pag-pass through ng mga ambulansya. Nakalimutan nila yon. Tapos when the National Task Force said extended ang lockdown sa Benguet, people in Baguio had to ask, kasama ba ang Baguio? Kasi we're an independent city. So nagkaroon ng ganong thinking na parang nakabukod kami, even if physically magkakatabi tayo. Unlike halimbawa sa Calabarzon, it was easier for Governor Remulla to say, I'm coordinating with the governors kasi wala silang ganun mga independent city that the governor cannot tell us what to do. Mas madali sa kanila to coordinate. And Metro Manila as well, parang magkakausap kaming mga mayors, kami nang nagkakaintindihan because there's not one like governor dictating on us naman. Parang.
Okay yung point na, which Glenda mentioned, no, na parang ironically, Duterte himself as a mayor, tapos dapat mas naintindihan niya yung need of these mayors to be autonomous to a certain extent, no. Tapos kailangan lang ng strong leadership na ito yung policies, ito yung guidelines, bahala kayo mag-execute at the local level. Pero yun na nga, yung leadership na galing sa taas, parang doon din nagkakaroon ng problema. I'd like to jump lang to yung issue rin of messaging kasi napakahalaga rin nito during a crisis situation. Will you agree with me that in the last few public addresses by the President, medyo nagkaroon naman na ng mabuting bagay at improvements compared to the early parts of the lockdown? Okay ba? Mas effective ba ang messaging ngayon?
I mean by the President himself?
Yes.
No, nothing, as far as he's concerned, nothing has changed as far as Duterte's lips are concerned. Kasi in the latest, he said, of course, he threatened specific people, Shell Jokno, Sani Trillanes, so in a way the arrangement of extending the lockdown, the arrangement wherein Harry Roque spelled out everything first, well, that worked, and then they made him just say his own thing. But I don't think the messaging from the President himself will change because he's Pavlovian in that sense. I give you a threat, and I reward you if you do what I say. So that's him. So I think that's why they had to make Harry Roque announce first the very important details of the extension. So maybe that has changed, that one.
Okay. Glenda, is Harry Roque good for this administration?
Well,
To a certain extent, siguro, I think the unique naman of Harry Roque is that he does his homework, right? I mean, compared to Panelo, I'm sorry, Sal Panelo really would just wing it and really will misinterpret the law, ganon, just to suit his ends. Walang qualm si Sal magsinungaling, mag-stretch ng logic, etc. Even to the palace reporters who covered Harry in the first few years of this administration, they concede to the fact that he does his homework. He reads up on that. And I think there is a clear attempt to manage the messaging, but the president is a tough client eh. Mahirap talaga. You cannot, mahirap. That's why they've done all sorts of things, diba? Una, they taped it. Second, now it's the presidential spokesman speaking before the president speaks. So siguro they figured that would be more effective. At least lumabas na yung totoong storya, and then the president can go ahead cursing the communists, diba? And so ganon. So there's an attempt, but ultimately kasi messaging is really the president because he's a very strong brand, and it's so medyo tough call.
Gigi, you wanted to add anything?
I think what they need to do is to further reduce the number of briefings every day. Kasi if they're thinking they are covering as many bases as they can, taliwas yung na-achieve nila eh. It's confusing more people, it's pitting one official against the other. Parang dapat mag-usap muna sila, mag-Viber group muna sila, and say this is our, parang you remember, Chai, that you wrote about how organized was the cascade, the formulation and cascading of campaign messages week by week, day by day nung Duterte campaign. Parang nasaan yun ngayon when you need it, na mag-usap muna kayo, and then a few people would speak na ito yung message na iisa lang, tapos yun yung ipaparating mo sa tao. Ang nangyayari is every time they have a briefing, you will have a lot of follow-up questions, you will have a lot of things you wanted clarify. So hindi nagkukos lang siya ng confusion. So,
I noticed though, di ba, ang dami-daming briefings in a day. Merong IATF briefing, merong DOH briefing, kanya-kanya, tapos may Harry Roque briefing, before nun so very disparate yung messages. So ngayon na Harry Roque is in, parang I guess merong mas deliberate attempt to make it mas efficient, and sana isa lang yung nagsasalita. So I don't know if to you, yun na nga, ang problema nga kasi, Duterte himself is difficult to control. You really cannot, no? So parang it's a tough job then for the spokesman. But do you see this evolving over time, that eventually isang briefing, isang spokesman, coordinated lahat, hayaan mo na ang presidente, pero essentially one voice, one message?
Ako, I think yung pwedeng reduction ng briefing that they could do is, right now, what's happening is there is a task force briefing, and then after that, it's followed by Harry Roque's. Parang, sana, it's just that the task force briefing moderated or led by Harry. And then, sana dun sa task force briefing, you have the guests from different sectors or different agencies minus the DOH, so that yung DOH briefing in the afternoon, andon lahat yung health-related updates natin. Hindi yung minsan merong nag-update ang DOH sa umaga na briefing ng task force, and then may bukod pa siyang briefing sa hapon. And then, since you already have the task force briefing in the morning, I don't see the necessity of having the another task force or national plan briefing in the evening by Galvez. Parang, hindi ba your job is to implement what the task force agrees to implement? So bakit may bukod kang briefing? And then sa presidente, yung late night niya or early morning broadcast niya, parang bigay mo na yon, presidente yon, gusto niyang magsalita. But sana din doon sa presidential briefing, stop making a show of cabinet officials sitting around you tapos para silang nagre-recitation na isa-isa mo sila pinapa-update. Parang hindi ba dapat andun na din yan sa task force briefing sa umaga? Parang if the president wants to make an address, let it be just the president talking. Tapos, wag mo nang paikutin na meron ka pang kinoconsult. Kunyari, pinagsasalita mo isa-isa. Parang nakakapagod, nakaka-confuse, and yeah.
Marites, you wanted to say something?
No, kasi ngayon may limits kasi ang reporter sa DOH briefings. Kasi I've been following reports of health, well, not all. And there are several questions na unanswered sa reports ng news reports on DOH briefings. Then I found out, of course, from Bonds and others, that from one other reporter, that the questions are emailed to DOH and that they're not necessarily answered, especially if they're tough questions. So may limits talaga yung virtual press con. For example, DOH said there are 18 clusters. They announced 18 clusters. This is after 6 weeks, since March 6 or whatever. Saan yung 18 clusters? Anong ginawa niyong contact tracing? Walang sagot kasi they don't answer questions that are difficult. Tapos, dun sa coordination, I've been following testing. It's my obsession. Testing has become my obsession. And the IATF kept saying, especially that Carlo Nograles, he even mentioned 20,000 tests on April 27. And then, National Anti-COVID-19 Task Force General Galvez said, oh, we will have 8,000 by this time. Of course, today, nothing has been met. So what
4,000 plus.
4,000
plus. So what if, as Gigi said, it's so easy to coordinate, diba? To say, okay, shall we announce this now? How many tests can we really achieve? So, yun, for me, fail ang DOH sa delivery, fail din ang IATF in giving us the right message on testing. They're just successful in locking us down.
Ang sabi naman, if you look at the numbers daw, nag-research din ako. Parang ang case fatality rate natin is 6.6%. And it's higher. It's higher pa than the US. Ang US is 5.7%. Siyempre wala nang tatalo sa Germany, 3.9%. Tapos among ASEAN countries, parang ang Indonesia lang yung mataas kesa sa atin. So parang the argument might be made na okay naman, we're not doing as badly as the other countries. Parang meron pang mas malala sa Pilipinas. And then even if you look at the yung tinatawag nilang mortality rate, parang per 100,000 na population ng Pilipinas, hindi rin naman tayo ganun ka-alarming. So kumbaga, in that perspective, government can say na we're fine. We're not in the, kumbaga, if it were a wide spectrum, parang we're safe pa. Parang pwede pang, we're not as bad as the US halimbawa or the European countries. Pero yun na nga, what we want to say is, hindi naman kailangan maging ganito, di ba? We want it to be better. G?
At saka, yung pinagbabasihan kasi ng numbers nila is only the people who already tested positive. So it's like saying ganito lang karami tayo and therefore ganito lang din kadami yung deaths because we only tested those with severe symptoms na. So parang hindi natin alam how widespread talaga the outbreak is because we're not testing extensively. So yun pa. So parang medyo misleading if we will just compare our numbers sa ibang countries.
Siguro last question lang. Parang how do you see this playing out? Parang magkakaroon ba to ng political repercussions? Magkakaroon ba to ng impact sa 2022? Or will Duterte remain popular because yun na nga, nakikita naman na nakokontrol naman yung yung deaths, and then meron din ng mga recoveries, hindi ganun kadami yung mga namamatay. What's your projection?
Ako, ang fear ko is that kung tatagal pa yung lockdown, or kahit malift yung lockdown but the state of emergency remains, it might affect our preparation for the 2022 presidential elections. And I'm thinking that if the national government is totally in control of how people move, baka din maka-apekto yan sa how they will set up the elections in such a way that people who would want to vote against the administration candidates would be given a difficult time to cast their votes, to organize against the candidates of the administration. 'Di ba? Parang kung ngayon nga pupunta ka lang sa trabaho mo, hinuhuli ka sa checkpoint. 'Di ba? If they could do mapping, they could have a sense of where are the communities na umaayaw na sa administration candidates, and they could have stricter measures sa movement ng tao doon, di ba? I hope they don't postpone the elections, given that we have a Congress and a Supreme Court na pwedeng makipag-coordinate sa Malacanang into doing that. Ganun.
Glenda?
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's anything strategic about this administration, it's winning. They're very strategic when it comes to winning campaigns and winning elections and politics for that matter. So yon, expertise talaga nila yon. So we should be very wary and be very parang really subjected to scrutiny and expose every step or every indication that they would manipulate, reconfigure voting populations, etc. I don't know. So there's that. But on the other hand, I think also yung pandemic, it's gonna, parang yung impact nito matagal eh. So, ang hirap din if you're just a government that's so used to politicking, di ba? So mag-unravel din siya eh. So in a way, parang on the other hand, lalabas din yung parang the dam broke na eh. Parang merong mas empowered din na voice among Filipinos now. Parang medyo nabutasan ng konti yung bubble na the Duterte bubble, 'di ba? Parang ano ka rin pala. May kapalpakan ka rin pala. Kasi this crisis hits everyone eh. Hindi lang from the slums to the so yun. So on the one hand, it could be open to manipulation, surely, especially 20 to 22, but also it opens the path for a more active, more engaged citizenry, and maybe more watchful. Because this is not a disaster, hindi lang typhoon na makaka-recover ka in a month or so. Ang recovery nito will take years or probably even decades.
Marites? Sige, go G.
Chay, I'm worried about the finances of the local government units. Kasi we're not even halfway the year, and I can imagine ma-exhaust na yung funds nila. We have to remember that there are two sources of income for the LGUs, yung share nila sa national tax collection at saka yung local taxes that they collect sa mga permit and all. So yung IRA, mauubos agad yon, especially sa poorer LGUs na 90% of their operations dependent sa IRA. And then sa local collection, anong makokolekta nila? Sinarado nga yung mga businesses. So sinong magbabayad sa kanila? And then I urge that we look at October of this year when they will be drafting their proposed budget for the next year. Kasi I think doon lalabas na saan tayo kukuha ng pera, given that after the lockdown and after the peak of the outbreak, meron tayong rebuilding na gagawin the next year, and how do we finance that?
Marites?
Yeah, sana we are able to hold government to account for the billions of pesos that were allotted for the crisis. I'm always wondering, where is the money going? Okay, it's going to food, special, what they call this, amelioration funds. But why don't we have enough test kits? Why don't we still have enough PPEs? There are a lot of donations. There's a loan that we're making. So siguro yon, a very good product of this crisis will be an accounting of all the money spent. Where did it go? Tapos pangalawa, sana makita ng mga citizens, differentiate the national leadership from the local leadership. Kasi I've been asking, well, of course, within my limited household, sabi nung kasambahay ko, Ma, mamimigay daw si Duterte ng pagkain. Sandali, sino ba ang mayor nyo? So, but if I talk to someone from Marikina, Ma'am, nabigay na si mayor. ng pagkain. So, there is now a differentiation of credit, where to give credit. Hindi na sa presidente, pero sa mayor, if the mayors are good. So, I don't know, this is an opportunity, as Gigi said, for the mayors, the local officials to shine and do good. And we will see if they are able to compete in 2022. Ako gusto ko talaga lumabas na itong I'm glad that we are seeing good, young and promising local officials. So yun naman ang silver lining.
Glenda, may pahabol ka?
Wala, okay na.
Okay. So yes, it's going to be an extended problem. Hindi to matatapos. I think it'll take a year, at least a year, bago makahanap ng vaccine, which will hopefully put an end to this. No? Siguro yung dapat lang din bantayan is us becoming used to yung freedoms na nababawasan and becoming more tolerant of abuses by enforcers in the name of the community, in the name of public health. So yun lang din yung kailangan ding balansehin. So there are many things that we need to monitor and watch, and hopefully you will help us monitor the administration and let us know whether there are things that you spot, that you see in your neighborhood and in your barangay. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, Gigi, and thank you, Marites.
Thank you.
Till next month again, hopefully tapos na ulit ang lockdown. I'm Chai Hofelenia. Thank you very much for joining us.